Christy Axmaker, persuasive speech. Here's my 5 people. Juvenile court case, State of Minnesota versus Mr. and Mrs. L, October 18th, 2005. Mr. and Mrs. L withdrew their 3 children from a public charter school to begin homeschooling them. Mrs. L's mother was supervising a 9-year-old girl's homeschool curriculum when one day, shortly after they withdrew the children from school, a social worker showed up at the door and demanded to have an interview with the 9-year-old girl. When Grandma declined to allow the interview, the social worker threatened to take the children into custody in the presence of the children. The distraught grandmother allowed the worker to come in. A few days later, the worker filed a petition with county court alleging that the children were being educationally neglected and sought the removal of the children from their parents' home. I want you to imagine what your reaction might be to having your children taken from you just because you were homeschooling. Although homeschooling does create a monetary and academic threat to the public school system, any family in the United States should have the right to homeschool their children without fear of government intervention. Homeschooling has become a viable alternative to educating our children and is growing by 7% every year. Academic success is irrefutable as compared to public school, and this is shown in studies conducted by 15 independent services. First, I'd like to point out that homeschooling does represent a monetary threat to the public school system. The average child represents $10,000 per student. If they're not enrolled in the district doesn't receive that $10,000 and thereby losing programs such as computers, sports, music and the arts, and sometimes even staff positions. This gets very personal, and even I, as a public school or homeschooling mother of 20 years, can empathize with this problem. The districts are struggling to make ends meet. But the real question here is the education of our young people. Is a parent qualified? Do they have the right to take the education of their children into their own hands? Our Constitution, First Amendment Bill of Rights states yes, we do, with the Free Exercise Clause. And the Supreme Court agrees with us in Parham versus JR 1979. It states that parents are presumed to act in the best interest of their children. But unfortunately, the public school system and legal officials do not believe this, despite demonstrated success of homeschooling. So here, by law, yes, we do have the right to homeschool our children. But let's get right to the heart of the issue. Are our homeschooling children across the nation suffering from educational neglect? Let's look at the facts. Every year, 100,000 graduates are graduated out of the homeschool movement. Based on the Progress Report 2009, Homeschool Achievement and Academic Success, which is the most comprehensive homeschool academic study ever conducted, states that the national average percentile scores in all core and composite groups show that homeschoolers are averaging 7% higher in all groups from their peer group of public schoolers. The tests also show that students' gender, parents' education level, and the family income has little bearing on the results of the homeschooling students. A statistic of particular interest here is the extent of government regulation. States with low regulation, the students are still scoring in the 87th percentile. States with medium regulation, 88th percentile, and states with high regulation, 87th percentile. What does this mean? What kind of regulation are we talking about? States with low regulation, there's no notification required, and homeschoolers can pretty much do what they want. Medium state regulation are the states are asking for test results, notification, and professional evaluations. High regulation states are all of those things, plus government-approved curriculums, teacher certification of parents, and home visits by public officials. Now, if the government does not improve the test scores of homeschoolers, why do we need them? Is it really necessary? The results are consistent with 25 years of research, which show that homeschoolers consistently outperform their public school counterparts academically. In the past 11 years, homeschooling continues to grow, and the gap between public school and homeschool has increased by yet another 7%. In public schools, there are achievement gaps between boys and girls, low-income parents, and parents with low education. But the studies are showing that homeschoolers do not have these gaps. It appears from all existing research that homeschooling equalizes every student upwards. Of course, an education movement which consistently shows that children can be educated to a standard significantly above public school at a fraction of the cost will draw attention from the education industry and government. As taxpayers, we should be asking ourselves why a homeschooler can educate their children on an average of $500 per child when the average public school student is 20 times this amount. Remember Mr. and Mrs. L? They eventually were able to get their case dismissed from court. All charges of educational neglect were dropped after months of mental anguish, expenses, and legal proceedings. As a homeschooling mother, I have a vision of what America is capable of, and supporting the homeschooling movement will give our nation a generation of children who can think and act outside the box. Imagine adult homeschoolers becoming the leaders of our country and raising the bar for education. They will have new insights, new outlooks, and for fresh perspectives, something we can all look forward to. Homeschooling is a phenomenon that is here to stay, and as evidenced by its growth, the academic successes are impressive. And it is costing the American people significantly less to have dedicated parents take the enormous responsibility of educating their children into their own hands. Homeschooling works. Freedom works. We have earned the right to be left alone. Thank you.